All right, welcome to another deep dive. And this time, we've got a real treat. We're diving into Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Ooh, a classic.
Yeah, and you know what's really cool about this? It's not just like one straight narrative. We've got journal entries, we've got letters, even newspaper clippings.
It's like piecing together a puzzle.
Exactly. Each piece, adds another layer to the story. And that's what makes it so, I don't know, so immersive.
Absolutely. You're right there with the characters experiencing everything firsthand.
So let's start right at the beginning with Jonathan Harker. He's our entry point into this world.
Right, the young solicitor heading off to Transylvania to meet Count Dracula.
And even from the start, even from those early journal entries, you get this feeling that something's not quite right.
Oh, totally. Like those little details Stoker throws in. The howling dog outside Harker's window.
Yeah, creepy.
And that intense thirst he keeps mentioning.
Probably all that paprika they use in the food.
Could be. But it's like the land itself is trying to tell him something's off. Even the people he encounters, those Czechs and Slovaks, there's that unsettling detail about the prevalence of goiter.
I didn't pick up on that.
It's subtle,
Yeah.
but it adds to this sense of something being amiss in this isolated region. And then, of course, you have those more direct warnings.
Yeah, like from the driver.
Exactly. All those cryptic comments about, the need to get through the Borgo Pass before nightfall, the fierce dogs that roam the area. And let's not forget about that strange incident with the blue flame.
Very spooky. It's all building up to something, like Stoker is laying the groundwork for something truly unsettling.
Oh, for sure. And that something becomes very clear when Harker finally arrives at Dracula's castle.
Talk about atmosphere.
Yeah.
It's like stepping into a gothic nightmare.
Right. That imposing structure shrouded in mist, the unsettling quiet.
And the Count himself.
Oh, so polite, so hospitable, but with this underlying eeriness,
It's like he's almost too perfect, too charming. And Harker, to his credit, he starts picking up on those little details that don't quite add up.
Like what?
Well, like the Count's appearance. Harker can't help but notice those sharp teeth, the pointed ears.
Subtle clues. And let's not forget his aversion to sunlight. Stoker is slowly peeling back the layers, revealing the monstrous reality hiding beneath this veneer of normalcy.
It's brilliantly done. And it's about to get a whole lot darker from here, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Harker is about to find out exactly what kind of hospitality he's stumbled into. He's about to become a prisoner in the Count's castle.
A prisoner? But why? What's Dracula's game here?
Well, you see, Harker's about to discover the truth about his host. The truth about Dracula's true nature.
That he's a vampire.
Exactly. And not just any vampire. He's the ultimate predator, a creature of the night with powers beyond human comprehension. Harker sees him scaling the castle walls like a spider. He observes his aversion to mirrors, his strange habits, his unsettling strength.
Okay, now that's scary.
It's all there in those journal entries. Harker's growing fear, his isolation, his desperate attempts to escape, and then the Count's manipulative tactics to keep him trapped.
Ugh, it's chilling. I can almost feel the walls closing in on him.
It's a classic gothic horror setup, and Stoker is a master at building suspense. He draws you into Harker's predicament, makes you feel his terror.
But just when we're completely engrossed in Harker's plight, the narrative shifts. We're taken back to England, to Lucy Westenra.
A world away from the darkness enveloping Harker in Transylvania. But a shadow is about to fall on her as well.
You're right. Lucy's story seems so separate at first, but then this mysterious illness starts to take hold. And that's where the two storylines start to converge, isn't it?
Absolutely. And it's through this shadow, this illness that begins to plague Lucy, that we see the true scope of Dracula's reach. And that's where we meet the enigmatic Van Helsing.
Oh yeah, the doctor who seems to understand what's really going on with Lucy. He's not like any other doctor, is he?
Not at all. He seems to grasp the forces at play here, the forces that defy conventional medical wisdom.
And his treatments. Blood transfusions, garlic, religious artifacts. It's a fascinating mix of science and superstition.
It's like he's drawing upon ancient wisdom to combat an ancient evil. And remember, blood transfusions were a relatively new procedure back then.
So he's really pushing the boundaries of science to save Lucy. It's risky.
Very much so. And then there's the symbolism, using human blood to combat a creature that craves it. It's like fighting fire with fire.
But despite all that, Lucy's symptoms just keep getting worse. Those marks on her neck, the weakness, the sleepwalking episodes, it's like something is draining her life force.
It's the vampire's power. It's not just about physical attacks. It's about preying on vulnerability, instilling terror, and ultimately claiming control.
It's chilling. And as we'll see, things are going to take an even darker turn as Lucy's illness progresses.
This is just the beginning. We're about to enter a whole new level of horror and suspense. You know, it's striking how Stoker sets up this contrast in Dracula. Like,
Yeah.
you've got the bustling modern world of London, but then this ancient darkness embodied by Dracula.
Right. It's almost like watching these two worlds collide.
Exactly. You have Victorian London, a center of progress and science and technology. But then there's this primordial evil lurking in the shadows.
Waiting to pounce.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it really creates this feeling of unease. Like, no matter how much we advance, there are still these forces out there beyond our grasp.
Absolutely. It's that tension that makes Dracula so gripping even after all these years. And speaking of tension, Harker's escape from the castle.
Oh my gosh, yes. Talk about a close call.
It's a moment of pure terror. You're right there with him as he clings to that crumbling wall with the Count's brides closing in.
It's like something out of a nightmare. You really see Dracula as a predator, trapping his prey before the kill.
And then just when things seem hopeless, Van Helsing enters the picture, and he brings a whole new energy to the story.
He's like a Victorian superhero, fighting this ancient evil with science and ancient wisdom.
It's a fascinating mix. And it's interesting because he doesn't shy away from those traditional methods. Garlic, crucifixes, holy water.
Like, he's acknowledging that some things can't be explained away by logic alone.
Exactly. And in a way, that gives him an advantage over Dracula, because Dracula relies on that modern skepticism, to operate undetected.
And let's not forget the blood transfusions. Talk about a cutting-edge procedure for that time.
It was, and there's that symbolism again, using human blood to fight against a creature that craves it.
It's powerful.
Yeah.
But sadly, even with all their efforts, Lucy doesn't make it. She succumbs to the vampire's curse.
It's a turning point in the story, a moment where the characters and maybe even the reader realize just how dangerous Dracula really is.
And the way Stoker describes Lucy's transformation.
It's chilling. She becomes a twisted version of herself, driven by this insatiable thirst for blood.
And then those children, lured away by the so-called bloofer lady. It brings in this whole other level of horror, this idea that the vampire's influence is spreading.
It plays on those anxieties about disease and contamination that were very real in Victorian times. But it also goes deeper than that. It touches on the idea of Lucy's soul being trapped.
In this monstrous form. Yeah, it makes you think about the soul, the afterlife. What does it mean to be human?
These are big questions, and they have to face the possibility that destroying Lucy's body might be the only way to save her soul.
It's a tough decision.
Yeah.
No easy answers there.
And then we have Renfield, a fascinating character. He's so strange and unsettling.
Oh, yes. That bizarre fascination with consuming life. It's almost like he's a mirror to Dracula.
A distorted reflection, you might say. His obsession with controlling these lesser creatures, absorbing their life force, it echoes Dracula's own predatory nature.
It's like a cautionary tale. What happens when we give in to those dark urges?
Exactly. And as Dracula gets stronger, Renfield gets more and more erratic. He's like a barometer for Dracula's power.
It's tragic. But in the end, he provides the hunters with vital clues.
His sacrifice is heartbreaking, but it highlights how high the stakes are in this battle.
And then, of course, there's Mina. She becomes the key to tracking Dracula down.
Right. Stoker masterfully weaves this web of connections, drawing each character into the struggle, and Mina's psychic link to Dracula, it's both a weakness and a strength.
She's susceptible to his influence, but it's also the only way to follow him.
It's a dangerous game they're playing. Every hypnotic session is a risk, because Dracula knows what they're doing.
He's playing with them, taunting them. But Mina is no ordinary victim.
Absolutely not. She's intelligent and resourceful, determined to use this connection against him.
Her strength is amazing, and it takes them on a chase across Europe, back to Dracula's homeland.
And the way Stoker describes that landscape, desolate, ancient, untouched by time.
It's like a visual representation of the evil they're up against. And then there are Dracula's brides.
Yes, those alluring but monstrous figures. They add another layer to the story, don't they?
Absolutely. They represent temptation, forbidden desires.
The seductive nature of evil. It's a test for the hunters. Can they resist that allure?
It comes down to strength, resolve, and their loyalty to each other.
And so in this desolate landscape, surrounded by the essence of Dracula's power, they prepare for the final confrontation.
A confrontation that will decide everything. As we're talking about this final showdown, I can't help but think there's just so much more to Dracula than just, like, the horror elements.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's so clearly a product of its time, late Victorian era.
A time of massive change, socially, technologically.
Exactly. And there was all this anxiety about the future, about what it all meant.
And Dracula kind of embodies that, right?
Right.
He's this outsider, this invading force.
Oh, totally. He's foreign, he's disruptive, he's powerful, and he preys on the innocent.
And let's not forget the sexual undertones in the story.
Right, right. The way he targets young women, the whole seductive nature of his brides, it's definitely tapping into those anxieties about, well, about sexuality, about power dynamics.
It's all tied in. And it makes you think, like, Stoker was really onto something with all these themes.
Oh, for sure. And then you have Mina. She's such a fascinating character, stuck between these Victorian ideals and her own desire for, well, independence.
And her connection with Dracula kind of throws all that into even sharper relief.
Exactly. I mean, she's brilliant, she's capable, but she gets labeled as unclean because of this forced connection with the Count. It's tragic, really.
It really highlights those double standards for women back then. But even with all that, she never gives up, does she?
She uses everything she has, her intelligence, her strength, even her connection to Dracula, to help fight him.
Talk about a strong female character.
Mm-hmm.
And that final battle, wow.
It's epic. It's this desperate fight for, well, for everything. Good versus evil, the fate of the world. Stoker really pulls out all the stops with the imagery.
It's not just brute force that wins the day, though.
Right. It's strategy, it's cunning, and yeah, there's a strong element of faith in there, too.
Like Stoker saying, those things can be just as powerful as any weapon. So after this deep dive into Dracula, I'm curious, what's the biggest takeaway for you?
Honestly, it's the power of human connection. Even when facing something as terrifying as Dracula, it's that bond between people, that love and courage, that ultimately makes the difference.
I think that's a great point. And it also reminds us that evil can be, well, it can be subtle. It can prey on our vulnerabilities.
But Stoker also shows us that even the most ancient, powerful evil can be defeated. We just have to stand together. But here's a thought, and this is something I always wonder about with Dracula. We see him as the villain, obviously, but is there more to his story?
Oh, that's interesting. We do get those glimpses of his past, his history.
What if he's not just a monster? What if there's some deeper tragedy that led him to become what he is?
It makes you think about the whole idea of good and evil. Maybe it's not so black and white.
Exactly. Food for thought, right?
Totally.
Mm.
I feel like we could talk about Dracula for hours.
It's a story that keeps giving. The more you dig in, the more you find.
Well, on that note, I want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Bram Stoker's Dracula. And for all of you listening, we hope you enjoyed the journey. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those lights on at night.